Welcome to My Watches with Ben, where I talk about choices I've made in my watch collecting hobby, for better or worse. And you'll find out whether it's better or worse at the end of the video. Today's watch is a Raketa Worldtime Frankenwatch I purchased from eBay. Frankenwatch meaning it's a couple different watches, pieces from different watches put together. I think the inspiration is this 24-hour polar watch, and then the Goroda watch. It's kind of a mashup of the two. Goroda means city in Russian. Apologize for my pronunciation. Here it is on my 7.25-inch wrist with an AliExpress aftermarket mesh bracelet. Now I'll cover the specs, the positives and negatives, and give my final thoughts. So let's start off with the specs. Specifications. The diameter is 40.2 millimeters. The strap width, there's not really lugs here, the strap width is 18 millimeters. The thickness is 11.4 millimeters. The lug to lug, or I guess vertical distance, is 41.9 millimeters. And for water resistance, there's really no water resistance because there's not even dust resistance. The dust has entered into it before. It has a domed mineral crystal, and the movement is the Raketa 2609.HA movement, hand wind movement, wound with the crown. It has 16 jewels. The price I paid for it was $130 from eBay. The case is made of brass with chrome plating. In the product listing on eBay, the seller said the watch was manufactured in the 1990s, and since the USSR fell in 1991, the dial says here Stellano VCCR, so made in the USSR. So it might be a fake dial, or it might be a dial that predates the watch. It's unclear. Anyway, the functions of the watch are hours, minutes, and seconds. It's a 24-hour movement, so that means the hour hand completes one full rotation over the course of 24 hours. Additionally, there is an internal rotating bezel. This is another function it has, is a world time function. There's an internal rotating bezel that you control with this secondary crown. From what I can tell, Raketa never produced a watch with one of these internal rotating city rings. So the ring probably doesn't belong to any Raketa watch. It's probably not a Raketa product. But I'm not an expert on this. It came with this bracelet right here, and you can see the links are folded metal, so they are hollow on the inside. It has just a generic clasp with it, so this is probably not what would have come with the watch. It's just something the seller found. I'm not sure. So I wanted to talk briefly about Worldtime. I really wanted a Worldtime watch because the idea just fascinated me, frankly. I have family and friends and coworkers that are across 5 other time zones. And so I'm going to define Worldtime as a watch or clock that has names of the city on it. So that's what we've got here with this Raketa. We've got Denver here at the 12 o'clock. Oh, I should adjust it. It's now 1 o'clock. It's now 1:25. So I can put it here at the 1 o'clock. And if I want to know what time it is in London, here it is. That's pointing at 20 o'clock. So it's 8 o'clock p.m. in London, according to this. There's always issues with daylight savings time with these watches, but I just love that concept of being able to see the world around the dial like this. So there's kind of 2 basic types of world times. I know I have a chart here that shows 4. Really, there's only one world time that's legitimate, and that's this format here in this clock I've got, where you've got the cities that are stationary and the time moves around. That's the big boy of world time. There's there's 3 other imitator types at least, but I've got 3 on the chart. this Raketa falls into the second type here, where you can kind of move the cities around and then look down and you see it. The disadvantage to this is that if you just glance at your watch, it's never going to be right, because if you set this, an hour later, it's wrong. So you're always going to be having to adjust it. This particular internal rotating one is a little bit clunky. It's a little bit easier when you have a bidirectional rotating bezel on the outside. The third one is just kind of an imitator one where they've got a 12-hour movement. That's not very exciting. And then the fourth one is probably pretty cool. I've never owned one. Some kind of electronic wizardry is involved there, where you press a button or something and then it'll show you the time in a certain time zone. It's not the same to me as seeing all the world on the exact same watch at a glance. You can just go say, oh, what time is it in Riyadh? And then you can go look, or something like that. So that's pretty darn cool. So now let's move on to what I like. Pause this. So I really like the red dial on this watch. It is very pretty. I don't know if it's real or fake, if it's from Raketa or not, but it's very pretty, and I really do enjoy it a lot. The case is very aesthetically pleasing to me as well. The lugless case here is very charming. I love seeing the Cyrillic. I studied Russian in college, so it really pleases me to look down and see Denver and New York right there. New York. That's pretty darn cool. And it is kind of tough, though, because I'm in the positives, but I'll just mention this here. Cities such as Vladivostok, I'm sorry for my pronunciation. I'm not really familiar with that, but I am familiar with Tokyo. So, they could have put Tokyo for the +9 time zone rather than that other one. Another positive I love is the 24-hour movements. It just pleases me to see the whole day right there and just know it's going to go around once in the whole day. I don't know why that just really, really intrigues me. It makes me happy. I like that there's an in-house movement with this. There's the Raketa 2609HA, and I've put it up on the screen for you to look at. I just kind of have one photo of it for the one time I opened it up. The watch is very comfortable to wear. It's very light and it's a nice size. Now on to some negatives. While it appears that the hands have lume, this is just a style of the hands. There's white paint, but the paint is not lume, so it has no after dark time telling function. Another annoying thing is it's very hard to change the cities when it's on wrist. Kind of have to just slide my finger under here and just move it back and forth. Can't really grab it when it's on the wrist, so that's not very enjoyable. The crowns are very small. Winding is also really not much fun. The tiny crown, so similar issue. This one's a little bit harder because there's resistance, but it's a very tiny crown here. The brass is not as good as steel. It'd be better if they used a steel case. The mineral crystal will scratch more easily than sapphire. I know it's probably silly to think that low-end Russian watch would have sapphire on it, but sapphire would be nicer. For the $130 I paid for this thing, now I know a little bit better about what kind of value you can get, and could have done better. The original bracelet was just awful. It's all hollow with these pressed metal links or folded metal links. It's just horrible. It smells like copper. It kind of feels greasy too. There's like grease all over it, so it's kind of gross. Now on to some of the bigger complaints. The fact that it just fills up with dust is very concerning. I don't know if that's just dust that's loose, that's been loose in here the entire time, or if dust is actually entering. I would believe either one, frankly. So it could be dust is getting in there, or it could just be that the movement is incredibly dusty to begin with. I've also seen wild changes in accuracy as I've had it, losing or gaining minutes a day. And, it could have been magnetized at some point. That causes it to go faster, from what I understand. But it's been inconsistent with the accuracy, to say the least. But the worst complaint I have is that the movement sometimes stops for no reason. And it's not a winding issue, because sometimes I will have wound it in the morning and, maybe a couple hours later, the movement stops and I had fully wound it, or at least wound it like 20 times, 20 turns. So the only thing that will make the movement start again is to pull the crown and actually adjust the time, and then that second hand will start up again. So that's probably the biggest complaint I have, is the fact that it stops sometimes. It really makes me not want to wear it as much as I would otherwise. The bottom line with this is that I love how this watch looks, and I love seeing the Cyrillic city names on the watch. However, due to the watch stopping, unexpectedly, it's really not enjoyable to wear it for a day. Some days I wear it and it never stops, but I always doubt the time it's telling me, because I know that it has accuracy issues, running really fast or really slow, and it has a propensity to stop for no absolute reason whatsoever. You just have to pull out the crown and turn it, and it starts up again. So I'm glad I picked it up. It's cool to have it. I certainly learned by buying this. But in retrospect, I wish I had gone for a legitimate Raketa Worldtimer watch rather than this Frankenwatch. So those are my thoughts. And now I'd like to share a Bible verse. As usual, I will start off with a disclaimer that I'm not a pastor or trained biblical scholar. I just like sharing what Bible passages mean to me and talk about how it's blessed me. Today's passage is Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verses 10 through 11. He who loves silver will not be satisfied with silver, nor he who loves abundance with increase. This is also vanity. When goods increase, they increase who eat them. So what profit have the owners except to see them with their eyes? So a little bit of background. Most people agree that the book of Ecclesiastes was written by David's son Solomon. The Bible says, and this will be a paraphrase of 1 Kings chapter 3, it says, "And Solomon loved the Lord," although Solomon was still a sinner and did some bad things. "So God appeared to Solomon in a dream, and he said, 'Ask, what shall I give you?'" God is asking Solomon, "What do you want?" Solomon said, "I'm a little child," and he asked God to give him. Solomon said, I'm your servant. Give me an understanding heart to judge God's people, so that I may discern between good and evil." So Solomon's asking God for wisdom to do God's work well. And this really pleased God. Since Solomon didn't ask for long life or riches, God gave him wisdom, riches, and honor. And God said that if Solomon walks in God's ways, Solomon will have long life as well. So Solomon asked for wisdom, and God gave him wisdom, and everything else he didn't even ask for. So all this is to point out that the writings of Solomon contain immense wisdom and moral teaching. So it's very profitable to read the Proverbs and Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes is a little bit difficult, but I'm taking a crack at this passage. So my first point about it is this first part: he who loves silver will not be satisfied with silver. So this passage points out the folly in loving to achieve great material wealth. This intangible wealth, it says silver, but really the idea is money. Just having wealth, it will never satisfy. Such a pursuit is vanity. It says in the passage, vanity, which is Hebrew, translated as vapor, breath, empty, worthless, fleeting. It says also in this chapter that we all came into the world through our mother's womb naked, and so we will leave it naked. So it literally is worthless to have wealth. We're not going to take any of it with us when we die. So secondly, when goods increase, they increase who eat them. This means that the goods are enjoyed by consuming them. If you just have wealth, you're not really enjoying it. You may think that's enjoyable to have a bunch of wealth, but Solomon's saying no here. Whoever consumes the goods will enjoy the goods. Wealth is to be used. And third point here, so what profit have the owners except to see them with their eyes? So simply to behold wealth is vain, to just look at the silver or just look at the bank balance. The value exists in using what we are giving, not hoarding it. Okay, so an argument could be made that collecting valuable things, such as watches, is hoarding. Personally, I don't really think so. I think valuable things can be enjoyed. I don't think that's what this verse is saying. So, for example, in verse 18, he says, "It is good for one to enjoy fruits of labor, which God has given us." It is his portion. So it is our portion in life. When God gives us valuable things, we are to enjoy them. It's not a shameful thing. However, well, I'll get into it more. Let me keep reading what I prepared. My interpretation of the passage is that there is great futility in pursuing gain as a means unto itself. People can easily get roped into believing that wealth itself will bring fulfillment or happiness. Jesus said in Mark 10:25 that it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. I believe this is because rich men are usually rich because they've set that as a goal. They have pursued wealth to the exclusion of helping the needy and spending time with God and family. In fact, in this chapter here in Ecclesiastes, verse 12, "The sleep of a laboring man is sweet, whether he eat little or much. But the abundance of the rich will not suffer him to sleep." The man who's working hard and maybe doesn't have much to show for it, he sleeps much better than the man who just has all this wealth, but he has not worked hard to earn it. Which that happens in our modern times, but that happened back then as well. I think that shows us who are not super rich, it shows us, hey, we're not missing out. These people who are really rich, they have the same trouble sleeping as we do, or maybe more trouble sleeping because they have all this wealth. So how this passage has blessed me. It helps me to know the truth. The Bible tells me the truth. I have definitely pursued many futile things in life, and it has harmed my relationship with God. I won't go into all those things here, but yeah, I've pursued some bad stuff in order to try to find happiness and fulfillment, and it hasn't worked out. It is very important to put God first. This passage also reminds me that they increase who eat the goods. We should therefore enjoy the things God has given us. At the very end of this chapter, it says, "God answereth him in the joy of his heart." That's the King James. So God provides the joy. God is the source of the joy. I'll read the full verse 20 here. "For he shall not much remember the days of his life, because God answereth him in the joy of his heart." The things that we achieve in this life, they're not lasting. What is lasting is the joy that God provides us. That's all I've got on this passage. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.